Thank you so much. Muy buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. Or good morning, I think it still is. And thank you to Sam Liccardo. I am so proud to be America's second best mayor, and I'm so glad to follow America's best mayor. Sam is a dear friend, a great leader. He is one of the College of Cardinals of Mayors already, not just in this state, but nationally. Give him a round of applause and thank him for his kindness and his intro. It's a real joy to fly up here today, and I think we're a little pressed for time, so I'm going to try to compress my speech a little bit. But I want to thank this entire room for taking the time to allow somebody who's coming from the Valley, and by that I mean the real Valley, the San Fernando Valley, to come speak to you here today. I grew up as a Valley boy, so I feel very much at home here in the Silicon Valley. And San Jose has always been an incredible city. And the metro area here is one of the great forces, not just in California, but on the face of this earth. And the goodness that you can do in improving quality of life for folks who live here and throughout to be a model for change is something that inspires me as a mayor from down south. You know, on the plane here today, I flew up and you can see that incredible coast. I took a window seat, and at 38,000 38,000 feet above the air, you can see just what a beautiful state this is. I could see the coast where centuries ago Spanish explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo came along our coastline and found a land that he mentioned as Alta California. I could see the snow-capped Sierras that have just looked gorgeous right now with the dusting of snow that is on them. I could see off in the distance this Central Valley, and really it comes together. This place that we call home is not just a physical place, but it is a metaphor that has inspired the world, it's inspired this nation and continues to. The majesty that we have of our state in black and white, where Ansel Adams went to Yosemite, sometimes we take for granted what is in our backyard, but overlooking the Pacific Coast Highway on the way up here, we also trace that same route where the first peer-to-peer communication happened when from UCLA right up here to Stanford, the first proto-email was sent up. Of course, it landed incomplete. It was supposed to say log in, and it only had LO that got here, but it was the first email. And below us on Highway 5, where we see convoys of Teslas that are designed in Hawthorne in Southern California, built in Fremont, then taking the trip back down to the Port of Los Angeles where they can be exported across the country and around the world, we have never been more closely linked. This truly is one marvelous golden state. High above the state, late historian Kevin Starr's words came into focus as I flew up here. He said that California is one of the prisms through which the American people, for better or for worse, could always glimpse their future. And what he's talking about has a name. I was recently with a pollster who polls around the country, and he said, you know, Frank Luntz, you may know him, he's a Republican pollster, he said, there's the only one state that has the blank dream. It's not to say that Missouri or Wyoming doesn't dream, but there's the American dream, and it's only here in California that there is a phrase, the California dream. And it hit me that, you know, this California dream, like the American dream, has been an articulation of our aspirations, something to inspire us. And it's been built, like I believe my city, and probably you believe your cities are too, built on three core things that I wanted to talk to you about today, core values, and that's freedom, the idea of belonging, and the idea of innovation. Freedom, belonging, and innovation. And from the earliest days, California was this land of limitless opportunity, where manifest destiny and go west, young man was what Americans said, but where people came from all sorts of nations, under different circumstances, including those native Californians that were already here. But it was a place where more than in other places you belonged. In my city, people like Biddy Mason, a freed slave who in the 1860s became what would be today a multimillionaire and helped found many of the institutions of our city. People like Abdul Fattah Jandali, who just happened to be Steve Jobs' father, came to the state as a Syrian immigrant. This has always been a state in which there is a sense of that freedom and that belonging and that innovation. And I need not tell a room full of Silicon Valley doers and dreamers about that. But freedom, belonging, and innovation, that California dream, is what I want to dig into a little bit today. Historically, that dream has been about some simple things: a good job, a good school, a good house, a good commute. We could find all of those here in California easily. But today, a good job for too many is hard to come by. Housing is too expensive. Too many of our schools are still failing. And our commute, well, we all know how bad our commute is. And our problems aren't just limited here in California. At our national level, we see an unprecedented division and destruction and dysfunction. Where we should find kindness and caring, we see, unfortunately, corruption and cruelty. We seek to privatize profits and socialize suffering, when it should be vice versa. And overseas, we see increasing global competition that makes this moment a very critical moment for all of us. And we feel that here in California as the 5th largest economy in the world. When it comes to climate change, well, this is the greatest existential challenge. This is the great world war for us. It might not happen as violently and as suddenly, but it is as big a threat to our life. But despite all of that, is there any place you'd all rather be, more than here in California? I know that I would not rather be anywhere else than this state which represents that hope of the future. So as I mentioned, I come from the South and I come in peace. I know Los Angeles can be a confusing place to you Northerners, but our regions have always been linked here. I see that in my own family history. See, my California dream traces its roots back to a man named Chris Bain, who was the son of Irish immigrants in Rhode Island, came out here and became a wheelwright just after the gold rush in Sacramento in 1860. He was my great-great-grandfather. And when the gold rush slowed to a crawl, this state helped him transition to become a carpenter. The state lowered a ladder of opportunity to him. And my California story with my family doesn't end there. It continues with Mexican immigrants. My grandfather carried over the border in his mother's arms. Such a contrast to today, where he might have been ripped out of those arms, but instead was able to become a World War II veteran, a barber, a union member, build a small business, and provide opportunity. In that other valley that I grew up in, the San Fernando Valley, it was really the embodiment of that potential of the American and California dream. The Brady Bunch was literally filmed right down the street from where I grew up. It was a place where the middle class thrived. And my family story, like all of yours in this room, shows us that there's always been opportunity in this state. But in this spirit, today I come to you as that Californian, yes, as an Angeleno proudly, but also to learn from you, as well as hopefully share some lessons with you here today. To be able to spark dialogue between North and South, and the things that we've been doing, whether it's winning those Olympics and Paralympics or building a transportation network with the largest transportation initiative in American history, or investing in homeless solutions, these are universal things for us to share. In Los Angeles, I see everything through this prism of preserving the California dream, of that freedom, of that belonging and innovation. So let's start with freedom. In the past, freedom meant just the possibilities. But today, increasingly, I want to focus on economic freedom. Because we have too many people who don't feel economically free. They're crushed by debt, by their rent. Land is more scarce than it's ever been, and our economy is divided between those who have never had it better and others who feel left out and left behind. We haven't built an infrastructure that allows a middle class and future business to prosper. But I'm very proud of what we're doing in Los Angeles to help protect that California dream and provide economic opportunity for more. In just 5 years, we've created more than 200,000 jobs, a new peak. We've cut unemployment in half. We've actually created more businesses than jobs, almost 250,000 new businesses. In a country, unfortunately, where startups are 40% down from where they were in 1980, something that a lot of people don't know. But in 2018, we saw record businesses, we welcomed record visitors, the #1 tourist destination now in America. Los Angeles is the 3rd largest urban economy in the world after Tokyo and New York now, and only 22nd in population, the most productive per capita economy of any large metropolis in the world. Our port moved more cargo than any port in the Americas in their history, and LAX saw a record number of travelers, many of them coming right here from San Jose. But all of that means nothing if we just judge our peaks and don't look into our valleys. So we're focused in Los Angeles, and what California needs to increasingly address is providing greater pathways to all people to reach those summits as well. Let me give you a few examples of what we've done. I asked voters to pass a proposition called Prop HHH to build 10,000 units of permanent supportive housing for Angelenos experiencing homelessness. We passed, less than a season later, a countywide measure called Measure H, that was a quarter-cent sales tax to provide $3.5 billion over the next decade for the services, the outreach workers, the mental health professionals, the anti-addiction specialists, the housing navigators to find apartments and health care and all the things we need to end homelessness, not just address it. And 5 years ago, we set a bold goal of building 100,000 units of housing, the most that we had seen in 3 decades and the second most in our history. It was an 8-year goal, and we hit it after 6 years just this past year. I love what Senator Scott Wiener is doing, trying to push this conversation, what our Governor Gavin Newsom is doing, saying we should have housing dollars go to where transportation investments are being made and places that say, no, we can't afford to have in this state anymore. Everybody has to build that possibility of a middle class thriving here. And to help Angelenos overcome that challenge, as Gavin Newsom said in the State of the State this week, as our most overwhelming challenge is housing, to pay the bills, to ensure there's a roof over their head and a pillow underneath it, we lowered our city's business taxes and raised our minimum wage. You know, Washington is so broken, you have to pick your side. You have to either be for raising the minimum wage and not ever lowering business taxes, or lowering business taxes and never raising the minimum wage. What I love about being a mayor is you actually look at what works and what's right. And lifting our minimum wage in Los Angeles didn't just improve the quality of life for 550,000 Angelenos and their families, overwhelmingly women, by the way, but $1.3 million every working hour is in the pockets of Angelenos that they can spend on neighborhood businesses. We took a risk. We've rolled up our sleeves. And we also have done things to make sure that the pathway into higher than $15 an hour jobs is stronger for everybody. You might have followed that we recently had a teacher's strike, and though, like many mayors, I don't have any formal authority, I jumped in to try to get rid of this decade-old kind of binary conversation. Are you for charter schools or against them? Are you for teachers' unions or against them? When we share the same values of what a great school looks like, and if we can get past those divisions and build up something in a state where we've seen our #1 in the country funding go down to the mid-40s, where we see classrooms in which the ratios are sometimes 42 or 45 students per teacher, where a nurse shows up 1 day a week and you don't even know what day, and it's tough for kids to schedule the days they're going to be sick. We know we can do better. And with Oakland and Sacramento on the verge of their own strikes, I think here too our regions will benefit from shared knowledge of what we are able to bring together and the work we have to do for local and statewide measures to make sure that we are funding our schools with, yes, accountability, but also with the resources they need. You have a college promise here for 500 students in San Jose, which is marvelous to see. We also adopted a Los Angeles college promise, became the largest city in the country to make community college free, not just for 1, but 2 years. A year and a half into this program, we saw from our public schools 56% more young people graduating and going to community college. 56% in a single year. 9,000 students who have now been able to see that pathway. My wife and I are foster parents. Our foster son, who's now 26, found his passion as a chef. He's in a culinary program. After kind of drifting around for a while, we know that community colleges can help connect people with that career or a 4-year degree to go even further. And while we're addressing poverty and economic freedom in Los Angeles, we're making sure nobody is left behind, which takes me to the second part of this California dream, belonging. There's a lot of talk these days and for the last decade or two about inclusion and diversity. Those words are fine, but I don't like them as much as belonging. Inclusion implies somebody's going to include you. Diversity is kind of a neutral term. But belonging is emotional, and it's on equal terms for all of us, that no matter whom you love, no matter what color your skin is, what language your parents speak, no matter what religion you practice, no matter your zip code, that you belong here. And it's something that means a lot to me. Belonging in the abstract, though, means very little if you cannot translate it into reality. And so I think our second challenge is to create concrete steps for people, not just those coming to our state, but those growing up from our state, to find a way to belong. Consider gender equity, which has been in the news a lot. Usually it's something that just feminists or people interested in that over there in human resources deal with. But many of you who are leaders in some of the most innovative companies in the world, I want to issue a challenge. And let me ask you a few questions. I don't expect you to have all the answers. What percentage of women are on your boards if you're publicly traded? What percentage of women are in your C-suites? How diverse is your executive leadership team? And I'm not here to guilt trip you here. I'm here to share a model of how we did it in Los Angeles. And government's always told we're slow compared to the private sector. Sometimes we earn that. But when I became mayor, we did that inventory. I looked at the 400 or so people that I appoint, citizens to oversee our airport and our police department, all the commissions and boards. And within 6 months, a majority of those folks for the first time were women. I think it's 54% today. So if government can do that in 6 months, what are you waiting for? Go and do it. Find the women, find the people of color, find lower income folks of every color or people who were born in the wrong zip codes and find a pathway in for them. And find it in the places where it matters as well. We have launched something in Los Angeles with the tech community called Pledge LA. It's our venture capital and private equity funders, as well as our tech companies, who do two things. One, they open up their data of who they have hired and who they have in their governance structure. And secondly, they pledge to help us address some of our problems like traffic and homelessness by using technology. One thing is how they can do better, and the other one is how they can be more embedded in our community. And already we have 115 venture capital funds and tech companies that are signed up. We did this with the entertainment industry because you've seen the hashtags, Time's Up, Me Too, Oscars So White. And instead of just talking a game, we started including a model of how we could make sure that our entertainment storytellers look like the rest of our city and the world. Women and people of color, to be able to have not fetch my coffee internships, but real internships to learn the craft of the entertainment industry. You see, there's no patent that applies to these approaches, but too often we segregate off equity and belonging to a few people instead of it being a lens that we view everything through. And that philosophy of belonging attracts opportunities. Trust me, I don't mean to pick off a Bay Area scab, and maybe we share something against San Francisco here, but we were selected as the home of the Lucas Museum in San Francisco, which had a beautiful, beautiful pitch for it. It was literally a museum on an island. And the Lucases, who live here in Northern California, I think would have preferred all else equal to being here. But when we were able to share with them in the center of our city, right by the Coliseum, which has hosted 2 Olympics, and the California Science Center, that there were 9 low-income schools, predominantly students of color, low income, who could walk to that museum. And when George Lucas told me it would be amazing to have the largest museum gift from a single family in American history, have things like the Star Wars collection that he has, and a child can walk in and see how we imagined going into space, and then walk 2 museums next door, and to see the Space Shuttle Endeavour, to see how human beings actually did it, we can ignite change in this community, ignite change in this world, and inspire every kid, no matter whom they are. Imagine a young girl from the surrounding community being able to do that, and then pursuing her career just as Neil Armstrong did at USC across the street, to be maybe the first woman to ever be on Mars. That's belonging, not just hollow words of what we aspire to do, but what we can make our city and our state stand for. You know, it was the same thing with the Olympics, and we did a lot of careful research, talking to people in New York and Chicago when America had been turned down twice, even though we're responsible for 60% of Olympic revenues through our companies and through our sponsorships. But we heard that American cities had failed because we said, we're going to be awesome. We're America. We can get this done. We lost our humility. Can you imagine pursuing a spouse and saying, finally, when you're going to ask him or her to marry you, I'm going to be so awesome for you? You have to say how they're going to make you better. And our pitch for the Olympics is a good metaphor for what our pitch to the world needs to be as well, which is to be, we are good at closing ourselves off. You've seen that. We're watching that in DC with our global alliances and everything else, but we know our place is in and of the world. Yes, teaching the world, but learning from it too. And we pitched through Los Angeles and America that the world loved to love, even in the midst of wondering whether Muslim athletes would even be able to come in 2028. We were able to win that by saying, remember that America that is about your aspirations and the openness and belonging. Which takes me to the third thing, innovation. When the world comes to Los Angeles in 2028 for those Paralympics and Olympic Games, we hope to see a California display of innovation. And I invite you as Northern Californians, and trust me, we will bring some events and preliminaries and other things up here to Northern California. This is a California and an American Games. But we want to highlight American innovation. We want to see VTOLs, you know, the vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that are actually going to be transporting people working there. We want to show them the transportation innovation that we're investing in. We want them to feel what California and America is all about. It's one of the reasons that we invested in Measure M, and I want to encourage you to do something like this right here. It was the nation's largest local jobs and infrastructure transportation package in history, ×2. It's an evergreen sales tax, so it doesn't sunset. And a weird thing happened when we were polling it with voters, and in my profession you always have to say, it's only going to last for 5 years or 10 years, I promise. The longer we said it lasted, the better it did. When we asked people in focus groups, why is that? They said, why are we treating transportation like it's just something that's a one-off? Education, we don't say we're going to have a 10-year tax for schools, because there's always going to be kids who need schools. Whether you have a child in that school or not, you pay that because it's part of the common benefit. But for transportation, we know there's always going to be traffic. We know there's going to be a need. A growing city, a growing state needs that. And so we were able to pass with an over 70% vote what will provide in the just first 40 years $120 billion, 15 new rapid transit lines, pave our streets, fix our freeways, create green streets, look at our urban walkways, bicycle paths, something that was comprehensive and, oh, by the way, will create 787,000 non-exportable American middle-class jobs. That is the future for this country that in the past, don't worry that we don't make as much. That manufacturing sector, where you didn't have to have a college degree, in my town it was putting maybe bombers together on an assembly line to win World War II. Now it's putting together a rail line. The same level of prosperity without having to have a PhD to do it. And we're investing across transportation innovation. I mentioned vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. Uber Elevate, Uber Air has announced that we'll be a proving ground for that technology. We're harnessing some of the best software available to address our challenges. We're looking at the Boring Company and Hyperloop to move people and to move goods more quickly. We're using technology often in partnership with companies right here to do the most basic things like give a grade to every block of every street in every neighborhood of how clean it is through CleanStat so that people can be empowered to get involved at City Hall because their rating is lower than what they want to see and hold people like me accountable. Shake Alert LA is the first app in American history to alert you before an earthquake comes. And we're working with Northern California to put it online for you too, but we have the sensors in place, and Los Angeles is the only city in America now that can get those precious seconds to save lives and to save your property and to save loved ones. These milestones have been possible because that innovation piece, we are a platform for your greatest ideas. I know you have that up here with Sam, but I want to invite you too to Los Angeles. If you have an idea, a product, a company, come to LA and test it. And let me end with this because I think our time is wrapping up. But every generation hears this calling from those who rushed here for gold so long ago, for the migrants and immigrants who came here, helped us win the Second World War through the shipyards of the Bay Area, the aerospace assembly lines of LA. And of course, none of us would be here without the technology of Silicon Valley. Technology that enables an artist in Los Angeles to create a story. Netflix has the backbone up here. We've got the creators down there, and the whole world watches it. I want you to know that while I'm here as mayor of Los Angeles and working with Sam and others to address these, our greatest challenges, I'm also here to learn from you and to offer LA up for you. To come there. When I became mayor, people were trying to get me to not do car share, right? I was keep Lyft and Uber out. And I was thinking through history and like, how did that work for our bookstores? How did that work for other things? The choice was given to me, you have to be future phobic. Or others were saying, you can't stop that. Just let it happen. And the second option was to be future passive. Maybe you're excited about it, maybe you're depressed about it, but you have no choice. I said, I reject both of those. How can we be future guiding? How do we take the best of people's ideas, not wait for somebody else to do it, but implement it here? Not just be the place where technologies are developed, but then actually implemented in other places like China or the Middle East more quickly. California should be unafraid of its own shadow, should get out of the way, CEQA reform, which will help us build things quicker. Leaders need to come here and be able to see products, get to market quicker. We need to be the doers that we always have been in order for that innovation, that belonging, and that freedom to mean something. I've been reading a poem, thank you. I've been reading a poem by Robert Browning, and there's a line in it that says, a man's reach, and we can make it gender neutral, a person's reach should always exceed their grasp. A person's reach should always exceed their grasp. And I love it because it's the story of generations. It's the story of this country. It's the story of slaves who fought against slavery even though they died in chains, of women who said women should vote in a country that isn't even been 100 years of women being able to vote and died never having pulled a lever. It's about people who have stepped forward as entrepreneurs with a technology they never saw come to market, but without them would not have arrived there. This is a state that is always making sure that our reach exceeds our grasp. And in the poem, the second line, it says, after all, what is heaven for? But today, with you, as a child of this state, as a leader here with you in this incredible moment of possibility, Let us bring that freedom together. Let us bring that sense of belonging together. Let us bring our innovation together and make sure our reach exceeds our grasp. After all, what is California for? Thank you, my friends. I love being with you, and I look forward to our days together. Thank you.